So good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. Today, even as we are in stage 2 of our relaunch, we are facing unprecedented circumstances as Albertans, as Canadians, and as members of the global community. Over the past few months, our province has been grappling with the greatest threat to public health in a century, the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic resulted in the shutdown of much of the economy, both domestically and internationally. This, coupled with a global collapse in oil prices, has had a devastating impact on our economy and Alberta businesses. All of this follows 5 years of economic fragility for our province. While our first priority is protecting the health of Albertans, we cannot ignore that our economic downturn is also having a real impact on the health and well-being of Albertans. Alberta industries and businesses have been hit hard across all sectors of the economy. In fact, even as we move through the phases of relaunch, many business owners are still wondering whether they are in a position to reopen and if they will be able to recover. Over the past few months, we have been working to provide relief so that we can restart our economy and pave a path to recovery. While most sectors are affected to some extent, we recognize that many businesses are facing unique challenges. They are experiencing lower revenues and liquidity constraints, and they are taking on more debt. We have rolled out a suite of supports, including tax and utility deferrals, to keep as much cash as possible in the hands of businesses when they need it most. Alberta has also joined other provinces, the territories, and the federal government in the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, the CECRA program, to help small businesses pay rent, providing certainty and relieving some of the financial stress businesses are facing. With the supports that we have announced over the past few months, Alberta has one of the most generous support model for small businesses in Canada. But we know that more supports are needed. Over the past few weeks, my colleagues and I have been engaging with thousands of businesses across the province to hear more about the challenges they are facing. And through our recently launched online feedback survey for commercial renters and landlords, we've been hearing a consistent message. Alberta businesses are telling us that the Federal Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, the CECRA program, is not enough. Landlords are finding the program difficult to navigate, and many commercial tenants have told us that their landlords don't plan to apply. We're hearing that some landlords and tenants are struggling to work together to develop an alternative payment plan. So on June 5th, our government announced that we would be looking into additional measures to help end the concern of commercial tenant eviction. And today, I'm pleased to provide you with more details. This afternoon, I will be tabling Bill 23, the Commercial Tenancies Protection Act. This proposed legislation will safeguard businesses as Alberta deals with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic by protecting eligible commercial tenants from having their leases terminated due to non-payment of rent as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and preventing landlords from raising rent and charging late fees and penalties on missed rent. If passed, the legislation and upcoming regulation would cover the period from March 17th, when the public health emergency came into effect, until August 31st, 2020. The legislation would protect 3 core groups: commercial tenants with tenancy agreements that would be eligible for the CECRA program, but whose landlords have chosen not to participate; commercial tenants that have had to close their business due to public health orders; and commercial tenants that have had their business revenue decline by 25% or more as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. If passed, any late fees, penalties, or rent increases imposed on a commercial tenant by their landlord between March 17th and August 31st, 2020 would need to be reimbursed. While the legislation would prevent future evictions, the legislation would not undo any evictions or lease terminations that have already happened. It's important to emphasize that both commercial tenants and their landlords are facing unprecedented circumstances. Landlords are also struggling. So the Act would also help ensure landlords don't miss out on deferred rent by requiring that landlords and tenants work together to develop a rent payment plan for missed payments. Landlords will also retain the right to evict tenants should a tenant break terms of their lease that are not covered by the Act, such as damage to property. We expect businesses and landlords will work together in a respectful and fair manner during this challenging time. And this legislation will help create the conditions so that they can do exactly that. We continue to ask landlords to be flexible and understanding of their tenants' financial circumstances, and those who can pay their rent should pay. This isn't an easy time for anyone, but by working together, we will get through these tough times. I'm confident the business community will rise up to support one another. The successful relaunch and recovery of Alberta businesses is in the best interest of all Albertans. They are the backbone of our economy. They create the jobs that Alberta communities and families depend on. If passed, these protections will provide businesses with much needed support so they are better positioned to reopen and rehire staff as we move through our relaunch. We're listening to Alberta's business community, and we're responding to their needs by developing the supports Alberta businesses need to help give them peace of mind and boost Alberta's economy as we move through recovery. This legislation is one of our Made in Alberta solutions that expands on available federal programs and ensures that our province's businesses can return to prosperity. So with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
And with that, we'll go to the phones. As Minister Fir has to be in the House for 1:30, could we please just limit to one question? Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Our first question comes from Dean Bennett of the Canadian Press. Your line is open.
Good morning, Minister. Actually, good afternoon. So just so I understand, you would like to see the tenant and the landlord come up with an agreement during this time, but it's not mandatory then. So, for example, if they can't agree on a repayment plan, then I guess all that happens then is the tenant's not evicted until August 31st, but then faces quite a bill at that date. Is that sort of how it would work?
So thanks for that question, Dean. So yeah, part of the legislation requires that landlords and tenants work together to come up with a rent payment plan. And we're confident that Albertans, Alberta businesses, the landlords and tenants are going to do just that, come up with the payment plan that works best for each individual situation. We're not being prescriptive or dictating what the terms and conditions of that rent payment plan have to look like, but that is one of the requirements and expectations with the legislation.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Kevin Orland of Bloomberg News. Your line is open.
Hello, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. I'm wondering, when you designed this program, how much of the intent was to encourage more landlords to sign up for that secret program that the federal government rolled out?
Thanks for that question, Kevin. So one of the intentions of the program was to fill gaps or address issues. So with the CECRA program, we knew that not all landlords were necessarily participating in it, and we knew that not all tenants were necessarily eligible for the program because many of them found that the requirement to be eligible for the program of having a 70% or more decline in revenue was too onerous. So the intention of the program was to help and support our small businesses, our tenants, and our landlords and fill in those gaps. The program helps tenants who maybe aren't experiencing that 70% revenue reduction. They're experiencing much less but still struggling to pay rent. So it gives them that peace of mind that they're not going to be evicted. And it also helps the landlords because, as we just spoke about, one of the requirements is that tenants and landlords come up with a payment plan. So that gives the landlords the peace of mind as well of knowing that they will eventually receive those payments. So it's, as I say, a Made in Alberta solution that helps both our landlords and tenants.
Thank you for that. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Michelle Bellefontaine of CBC. Your line is open.
Oh, hi, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. My main question is, if I was a business owner and I was able to get my landlord signed up for CECRA, I would receive a 75% reduction in my rent, so I'd only have to pay 25%. Under this program, as I understand it, there's no reduction in rent at all. It just defers it. So people are basically being deferred, but there's still an expectation they pay their full rent. So why is that?
Thanks for that question, Michelle. So the good thing about this program is there is an expectation that the landlord and tenant come up together with a rent payment plan that works for both of them. So how long that term looks like, what the requirements are they have to pay and when, because we're going to allow landlords and tenants to work together to create the plan that works best for them, that's take some of the pressure off both the tenants and landlords because they can do what works best for them. Again, the intention of this program is to make sure that we're helping and supporting as many landlords and tenants as possible that may not be eligible for the secret program.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Janet French of CBC. Your line is open.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. You mentioned that landlords and tenants are already having trouble reaching agreements under SECRA, but this bill, like you just mentioned, also relies on parties reaching that agreement. So what happens if they can't reach an agreement? Can the landlord still evict the tenant?
Thanks for that question, Janet. So again, we know that tenants and landlords, they all have the same goal, is to let them make it through this pandemic and open up successfully. And we believe that they're going to work together to come up with a fair and reasonable agreement, and this legislation is just an extra tool to encourage them to do that. Following August 31st, if an agreement hasn't been made, landlords do have the option following August 31st to evict, but we believe there's going to be very rare instances of that happening because, again, landlords and tenants have the same goal, to make it through this successfully.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Catherine Grigowski of Alberta Today. Your line is open.
Good afternoon, and thanks for taking my question. So why does this legislation not restore leases retroactively for those who have been evicted, or why does it not provide compensation when restoring those leases is not possible?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Catherine, and it's a good one. So for evictions that may have already taken place, it's difficult or hard to undo what has already been done. What the legislation does do, though, is if there has been any late fees or penalties or rent increases that have been charged to a tenant after March 17th, this legislation would require that those monies be reimbursed to the tenant.
All right, operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Ashley Joanno of Post Media. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon. Under this program, my understanding is that tenants with landlords that don't follow through with the rules laid out in the legislation would be required to go to court for some sort of remedy. I'm wondering if you think, given the financial situation that a number of tenants are in right now, which is the whole purpose for this legislation, whether it's reasonable for you to expect them to rely on the court to enforce this legislation.
Thanks for that question, Ashley. So again, our hope and our belief is that landlords and tenants are going to work together to come up with fair and reasonable payment plans because it's in the best interest of both of them to make it work. A tenant doesn't want to be evicted, and I don't believe landlords want to evict. As a last resort, yeah, the court is the remedy to deal with this, but we're hopeful and we have confidence in Albertans that that will be the exception rather than the rule.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Michelle Belfontaine of CBC. Your line is open.
Hi, sorry, I dialed in again because I really have an issue that we're not getting follow-ups here, given that the tech briefing this morning was not sufficient. So I'm going to ask the question again. Minister, you rely a lot on the goodwill of landlords and tenants to work together and come up with some kind of rent repayment program. What happens if...
Michelle, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you. There is some bad background feedback, so I'm going to get you to start again, please.
All right.
Sorry.
So, I still want to drill down on this whole idea of you relying on the goodwill between landlords and tenants. Yes, I'm sure there's some really great landlords out there, but there is a problem out there with landlords who aren't willing to play ball. So I want to understand what provisions are there because really this bill does not provide any kind of financial relief to business owners beyond delaying the inevitable. It doesn't offer the same kind of rent relief that we have seen from the federal program. So why is the government not providing that to business owners?
So, Michelle, there is all sorts of supports that our government is giving to our job creators, in addition to the numerous federal programs that we're participating in addition to the provincial deferrals and supports that we announced very early on in this pandemic, in addition to the small business grant that we introduced on June 5th, with more details coming out very shortly on that, and this Commercial Tenancies Protection Act. These are a suite of measures that we've been rolling out over the last few weeks and months to help as many businesses be successful and relaunch. And all combined, Alberta has some of the amongst the highest supports for businesses, for landlords and tenants throughout this pandemic. So all of that combined with the goodwill and the good intentions of landlords and tenants to work together, we believe is providing them the supports they need.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Dean Bennett of the Canadian Press. Your line is open.
Hi, Minister. Sorry, I don't have any other chance to get you on this, so I thought I'd try now. I believe it's in your bailiwick. I'm hearing that either the CFL or the feds are trying to get the provinces involved in a potential bailout package. Potentially, maybe the provinces kicking in $7.5 million per team, and the feds matching that. Has that come to your attention? Has that come to cabinet? Is Ottawa or the CFL looking to involve the provinces in a CFL bailout, and would you be amenable to that?
So it sounds good, but I don't have the answers on that for you, Dean. But please reach out to my office, and we'll make sure we steer you in the right direction of who in government can give you any additional information on that may or may not be available.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That's it for right now. Thank you.